Morning, guys. My name's Ian Reeves. I'm a real estate investor in Kansas City. So we're going to start a little channel here, and it's basically just to help other people learn how to invest and things like that. So there'll be more videos to come. But the topic of discussion this morning is paying off student loans or other debt versus buying a rental property. So the motivation for this video actually came after talking with some friends this weekend. And what they were telling me is they have this debt, student loan debt, and they really wanted to learn how to invest. But their thoughts were, I should pay off that debt first, and then we'll start saving our money for rental properties. So um, I guess my thoughts were a little bit different on that, and I kind of wanted to walk you through an example of why I would say it's actually better to take that money. Obviously, continue making your minimum payments on the student loan, but take that money and actually buy a rental property first and then use the cash flow from that rental property to pay off your debt. So it's a little different way of thinking. And I know most of us are taught that debt's bad and we should avoid it like the plague. But I'm here to tell you that a lot of wealthy people think a lot differently about that. So wealthy people, a lot of them actually use debt as a tool, and I would argue that when used correctly, debt can actually be, it can be the difference between actually getting ahead financially and not. So, that being said, I'm going to walk you through an actual example here from a property that I own in Kansas City, and I'm going to run you through some of the numbers here. I apologize about the poor quality of the video. I'm going to try to get some better software here to help with that, but for now, we're just going to have to make do. So the property that I'm going to be showing you this morning, it's 10522 Skiles Ave. It's in Kansas City, Missouri. So I bought this house for $60,000. It's currently rented for $850 a month, and I purchased that house with a 20% down investment loan. So 20% down is a pretty typical investment loan. That's amortized over 30 years and 4% interest. So if you're going to go out and get an investment loan, that's all pretty typical. And the other key point here is that if you're a savvy investor, you're never going to pay full price for a house. So you always want to make sure that you're getting a great deal. And over the long run, getting a great deal is going to make a big difference on your equity gains. So uh, I bought this house for 60. It's really worth about 66. So I have, a little more than, let's put close to 20% equity off the bat there, 15%, something like that. So here's the numbers. Again, sorry for the poor quality. This is a picture of the house. This is actually from the Bigger Pockets calculator. So if you're not a member of Bigger Pockets and you're interested in real estate investing, I would highly recommend it. It's a great site. They have a lot of tools on there for you. So here you can see the monthly income, 850. Here's my monthly expenses, and then here's my cash flow of $217 per month from that property. You can also see here's where I bought it for 60,000. I had about $2,000 in closing costs. It wasn't exactly 2,000. It was something around there. And then here's some details on the loan. So one of the common mistakes that a lot of people make when calculating cash flow is they basically just take the mortgage payment minus the rental income, and they figure that whatever the difference between those two is, that's their cash flow, and that is obviously not correct. So there's a lot of expenses associated with owning a rental property that you need to make sure you're accounting for. And here I'll show you what I've put away. Vacancy is the first item that you're going to see on here. So I have 5% vacancy, and when I say 5%, so that's 5% of the rental income. So 5% of 850 is 4250. That 5% is based on just talking with local property managers and other landlords. That number can go up or down depending on the part of town or where you're investing in. But on average, 5% is a pretty good vacancy number, especially here in Kansas City. You'll also see that I have money put away for CapEx, so that's capital expenditures. So that's your big expenses like roof, furnace, things like that. So most of those items were new in this property, so I have 4% put away there. Then I also have money put away for repairs at 8%. So between CapEx and repairs, I have 12% of my rental income that I put away every month, just basically to budget for that stuff. And the other thing you'll see that I have on here is management. So this is probably the single biggest excuse that I hear from people for not wanting to own a rental property is I don't want to deal with tenants and I don't want to fix toilets. So I'm going to tell you that I don't do that stuff. I actually pay a property manager to manage the property for me. And they typically take 8 to 10% of the rental income, and that is their fee for managing the property for you. And in my mind, that's a small price to pay to not have to deal with those headaches, and it just allows me to focus on the more important things, like which for me is buying more houses. So that's what that 10% is for, and I will say property manager is going to make your life a lot easier. Okay, so the example that I was going to use here was student loan debt. So I'm going to make some assumptions here. I'm going to say you have $20,000 worth of student loan debt. So this is a little loan calculator I'm using on mine here. But so we've got $20,000 in debt. I'm going to say you've got a 20-year amortization and 7% interest rate. So thinking back to my student loans, I think 7% was probably a pretty reasonable number. So the payment on that loan is going to be $155 per month. So as you remember from the property calculation here, our cash flow is $217 a month. So that means that the rental income from that property is actually more than covering our student loan debt. So if we would have taken $20,000 and paid off that debt versus buying the rental property, we're obviously in a lot better situation here with the rental property. So we're basically getting an excess of $62 a month in cash flow even after paying off the student loans. The other thing that I'm going to show you here, so there's multiple ways that you actually make money on a rental property. The first one is obviously the cash flow, but the other thing you have to think about is you didn't pay cash for this property. You put 20% down, you have an 80% loan against it, and the tenant in that property is actually paying down your debt. So you are gaining equity in the property every year just by that tenant paying down your debt. And then the other thing is you also have appreciation. And appreciation is basically the tendency for the value of a property to go up year by year. Obviously that doesn't happen all the time, as if any of you were around in 2007, you're probably aware, but in general, over time, property is going to basically keep up with inflation. So I've plugged 3% into this calculator here for appreciation, and I'm basically anticipating that property value, rents, and everything like that grow 3% per year, which historically that's probably even a little conservative. So you'll see here equity. So after 4 years of owning that property, I have $29,877. So I basically have $30,000 in equity after holding that property for 4 years. So what do you do with that equity? So you have $30,000 there. You also have the excess $62 a month, which if you do the math over 4 years, that's another $3,000. So I would argue you've got a couple different things you can do here. You can either refinance the property or you can sell it. So if I was to sell this property to another investor, then I'd make $30,000 plus the additional $3,000, and that's actually enough money to go out and buy another property. So that means that after 4 years, I've taken one property and I've turned it into two. So my cash flow has gone from $217 a month to double that. So I'm at $450 or so, something like that. So after just 4 years, I've significantly increased my net worth, and I'm throwing off more cash. And every 4 years, I should be able to repeat that process, and that's not using any creativity at all. That's just buying a rental property at a slight discount and reinvesting the money. So my argument here would be that you're in a much, much better situation having bought this rental property than you would be if you just paid off that debt. which is probably what most people would do. So I guess the point that I wanted to make here is the thing that really got me into real estate investing was about 3 years ago. I read this book, and it was called Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. So you've probably heard of the book. That book quite literally changed my life, and it really changed the way that I think about wealth and money. So I guess Robert Kiyosaki's main point is most people really get stuck financially, and the reason is, they make more and more money, but as they make more and more money, they tend to spend more. They buy bigger houses, they buy new cars, things like that. So the problem is that all their money is always going straight out the income column into the expense column, and they're buying what Robert Kiyosaki calls liabilities. So a liability is anything that takes money out of your pocket. So car payments, your primary residence, paying for your house, all of those are liabilities. Rental income, rental property, a business, things like that. Those are what Robert calls assets. So his argument is that the wealthy, they think a little bit differently, and rather than spend their money on um, liabilities, they go out and buy assets, and then they use the money from those assets to pay off to pay their bills. So if you just keep buying rental properties and reinvesting, your cash flow is just going to increase over time. And eventually that cash flow can even, it'll pay all of your bills. And you might be surprised how fast you can get to the point where, all your bills are covered. And at that point, you're actually financially free. So, um, anyway, I think I've kind of showed you the power of passive income and cash flow here. And hopefully you see that maybe you need to change the way that you're thinking a little bit about debt. And I know it's kind of a hard mindset shift, but it's one that I've definitely, I guess, changed my attitude towards a little bit. So there'll be more videos coming up here. I really appreciate you watching. Thanks.